Well, hello there, book connectors. Welcome back to the Book Connection. I am your host, Black Devil, and I am here with a video. But before I tell you what it is, let me say I have started reading the book Pride by Victoria Christopher Murray. That's the 5th book in the 7 Deadly Sins series. Okay, and I'm almost done with that. I'll probably be done with that tomorrow, and I have to go back and get my notes together. But anyway, I started reading another book. Just reading because nothing was really jumping out at me. So I just started reading this one book, and it turned out that these books I read, it does say box set. So I thought, okay, box set, I get the whole kit and caboodle in these 3 books because it's a trilogy. And I read it. I found myself going, after I finished the first book, I went to the second. Now, I usually try to read something different in between, but this time I kept going straight through. And I have completed it. The name of the, this is a series. Come to find out, this is a whole series. I think it's like 27 books in the series. So I guess I just didn't pay any attention when I started reading this, because I never would have started. If I know a series is that long, I usually skip over it because I tend to burn out maybe past the 10th book. But I'll finish it. I just hope it's worth all of it. But anyway, the title of the series is the Gaslight Mystery series, written by author Victoria Thompson. I tried to use her for and about the author, but there's really not much they said except, they listed her birthday and then her body of works. And then, unfortunately, she passed away in August of 2024, she passed away. So, yeah, I read 3 books, and that's what I am going to do. You will see, scrolling across your screen, the first book in the series is Murder on Astor Place. Then the second one is Murder on St. Mark's Place. And then the last one in this box set is Murder on Gramercy Park. And so, once again, I thought that this was the whole thing, but when I went back to look, she has quite a few, and I do have them. I guess I have them all. I don't guess another one will be released before I can complete these 27 books. But I did like these 3, so I will follow through the next ones. I think it's also box set is 4 through 7. So, like I said, collectively, this is entitled the Gaslight Mystery series, and this is the series that started it all for her. I think most of her books are serials, because I've seen something about the city, like City of Scandals, City of Liars, City of Secrets, something like that. But my focus is the Gaslight series. So, let me see. If I had to summarize these first 3, does anybody remember the television show? Now I'm about to Murder, She Wrote. That's it. Murder, She Wrote, starring Angela Lansbury. You know, she was an investigator who found herself right smack dab in the middle of any and everything going on. It's like she may not have seen you in 40 years, but soon as something happens, she finds herself right in the midst of it. And I was thinking about that, especially by the time I got to the 3rd book. And you'll see why I say that here shortly. So sit back and hopefully enjoy your Saturday evening with me. Well, now it's Sunday evening with me because I don't even know what I did, why I didn't get started last night. But anyway, let's talk about book 1 of the Gaslight Mystery series. It's entitled Murder on Astor Place. Now, the lead female character in these books, her name is Sarah Brent. She is a midwife and a nurse. The lead male character in this book is a police chief named Frank Malloy. Now, what happens is, okay, let's get to the murder she wrote for me. You know, like Jessica Fletcher, that was Angela Lansbury's character's name. She always found herself in the middle of other folks' stuff, and this girl is no different. So Sarah comes from a well-to-do family, and Frank is more, I guess he would be considered more from a blue-collar type family. So they really had no reason to cross paths until it happened. I'm right. Sarah has been summoned to this rooming house. The mistress of the rooming house is in labor. And so Sarah goes. Now she gets there and she sees an associate of hers. She sees her, I guess for lack of a better word, friend's younger sister there at the boarding house. Now the younger girl comes from the same type of upbringing that Sarah did, meaning she was well off or a well-to-do family or what have you. And she does see her, and she's like, well, I can't really stop and socialize. I have to go and deliver the baby. So she did, but somewhere shortly after the baby was born and Sarah she went home. But sometime the next day, she finds out that her associate's younger sister, whom she had seen in the boarding house just the night before, has now come up deceased. So when Frank comes, he starts questioning everyone who was around or who had seen the young lady. I think her name is Alicia. And so Sarah was the one that knew a little bit more about the type of family that Alicia comes from, but she couldn't understand because she had not spoken to her Alicia's older sister for several years. Matter of fact, Sarah had married a man that her family didn't approve of, and so they left. Her husband became a doctor until he passed away. Now, this all takes place in late 1800s, early 1900s. So, and you know, to get pregnant out of wedlock, that was like the greatest sin one could ever commit. But come to find out that Alicia is in the boarding house, living there because her family they were trying to marry her off to a man who I think was her father's age, if not older. And she didn't want to marry the man, so she ran away. She ended up at the particular boarding house. So when Frank and Sarah meet and he finds out that she knew a little bit more about Alicia's background, then she was like, well, I went to school with her older sister, And but I have not seen or talked to anyone from that family in, gosh, 5 or 10 years. And so she said, but I guess I can get in and see if I can get an appointment with my friend and see what she tells me. And so she does get in to talk to her friend. And the friend just kind of talked down about Alicia, how she got pregnant and she shouldn't have done that. And then when they tried to marry her off to a man of fine standing, she left, and they knew she was pregnant, which is why they were trying to send her away. They were going to bring her back and tell everyone that, well, that's exactly what happened. They tried to send her away till after she had the baby. Once she had the baby, she could come back. And her parents were supposed to raise this baby as their own. But now, Alicia has ended up deceased. So they just go around. Sarah talks to to her friend, who is Alicia's older sister. I can't remember her name. But at some point, she does have to talk to their mother. And the mother was always, she just seemed to always be a constant damsel in distress. Oh, it's too hot. I'm about to faint. Oh, so-and-so went off before I thought it would. I am about to faint. Can you please hand me my smelling salts? And she was just one of those, just she couldn't accept, or she just didn't deal with anything if it wasn't through rose-colored glasses. And reading, I was wondering why, because her daughter, her oldest daughter, is like maybe 15 or 16 years older than her youngest daughter, Alicia. So Sarah's talking to the mom and this, that, and the other, and eventually the mother says something about, marital relations, and she hadn't had marital relations in 30 years. So Sarah thought that was kind of odd, but she did make a note that this lady then. So eventually what happened was, when Sarah went back to talk to Alicia's sister, Lord, I wish I could remember her name. But when Sarah went back to talk to her, her sister was still like, well, it's her fault. It's her own fault. She did this or didn't do that, and blah, blah, blah. Well, it finally came to light that Alicia was not her parents' biological daughter. She was their granddaughter. So the lady that Sarah had known was the one who got pregnant out of wedlock first. And they sent her away, and when they brought her back, they took Alicia and raised her as their daughter. Well, once Sarah and Frank worked together, and everything is starting to come together. But the man she was supposed to marry, they never could hear from him. I can't remember if he was on to another woman, or if he had also died. So they just go back and forth. And how about at the end of the book, we find out that, yes, Alicia was pregnant. And she didn't want to marry the man she was supposed to marry because, number one, he wasn't the baby's father. And number two, he was her dad's age, if not older. So the father, Alicia's grandfather, who was technically She was the great. That man was Alicia's. The man she called dad was really the granddad. So they kept trying to get Alicia to see things the way they felt, and Alicia just was stubborn. She just would not go along with what they said. So eventually, the dad got fed up. And he deleted his own granddaughter to save face. That's how that book ended. And I thought, well, my goodness, the stuff people will go through to try to hide what eventually is going to come to light. And that would explain why her sister always seemed to talk so negatively about Alicia. Because she was her child. And she did basically what Alicia did basically what her big sister had done, which was to get married out of wedlock. Did I just say get married out of wedlock? I could not believe I said that. Getting married out of wedlock. But Alicia did what her big sister had done, which was to get pregnant out of wedlock. Okay, so now on to book 2 of the Gaslight Mystery series, and this book is entitled Murder on St. Mark's Place. And so once again, Sarah and Frank come together to solve yet another deletion. Sarah has been summoned in the middle of the night to go and deliver another baby. She goes to a boarding house. However, I don't think this is the same boarding house that was in the first book, Murder on Astor Place. But nonetheless, she goes, and this time, the mistress of the boarding house, her sister, has been deleted. And she finds out shortly after the mistress has the baby. So by the time Sarah gets there, it's just crowds of people all around. Somehow it's gotten out in the middle of the night, right before daybreak. So everyone is doing whatever they can. Sarah's having to fight her way back through to the baby. So in this story, the mistress, why can I not remember these? Oh, this is why I couldn't remember this name. The mistress of the boarding house, her name was Agnes. I'd never heard of that name before. I don't know if it was supposed to be Agnes or Agnes, but they kept saying Agnes. So Agnes is from Germany, and her younger sister has moved in with her sister's name was Goethe, and she's moved in with her older sister Agnes, and she's supposed to be working to save up money or to meet a man, to marry and all of this. But here's the problem. Goethe was a live wire. She liked dressing up. She liked going out on the town. She liked going to the movies. She liked doing whatever she felt like she had to do in order to make a man want to take her out and spend his money on her. But Agnes was just the opposite. She was just a stay-at-home homebody, having children. Her husband, he was one of those men who sometimes would be working with the police, but he would also entertain young women. Now, whether his wife Agnes was aware of this or not, we don't know up front. But he never, ever hesitated to say that he just didn't really like Goethe. I think Goethe was just too outspoken for him. She didn't know a woman's place. She's in a new country, and she's just, he didn't like her. There's really no way of getting around it. But it was like I said, she was a live wire, but she managed to make friends with at least 3 other women. And so they would all get together and pool their money, and they would go out. So Sarah knows there's a girl in the friend group. Her name is Lyle. I've never heard of that poor woman, but yes, this friend's name was Lyle. Now, Sarah, once again, just like in Astor Place, she was friends with Lyle's family. And Lyle was the younger one. She actually went to school with Sarah, she went to school with one of Lyle's older sisters. So when Frank realized he was going to have to use Sarah again to help solve this case, she once again had to use her connections to the family so that she could find out different things about Lyle, and if she knew anything about Gerta's behavior. And so she meets with the Butlers and Lyle's parents. Well, would you know, at some point, she ends up being deleted. Lyle does. So this just now is 2 cases that they are trying to solve. And she goes, Sarah was like, well, this was before Lyle passed away. They were just talking about Gerda and how nice she was, and she was kind of the one to let you know how she really felt about whatever. She wasn't necessarily rude, but if she felt like it was a sunny day, you needn't waste your time trying to tell her otherwise. So, but they all understood the roles they played in each other's lives. So she was a pretty fun girl, along with the other 3 ladies. But they used to go to this. Sarah said, well, when is the next dance? Because Gerda had left her home to join up with the girls. They were going to go out dancing. And so that's what they were telling Sarah. Sarah says, well, the next time they have a dance, let me know, because I want to go too. And they're like, I don't know about all of that. Now, this may be below your pay grade and things. And she was just chatting them up, seeing what she could find, because Sarah and her husband didn't have children before he passed away. So she had a few more coins. And even if he was still living, Sarah still came from a pretty prominent family, but she wasn't on the best terms with her parents because they didn't approve of her husband. He didn't come from money. He made his after he was an adult. He was a doctor. So, but she would take the girls and she would buy them soda sometimes. I know a time or 2 she bought them cake and lemonade, things that the men that they would meet up would do for them when they would go out on dates. But Sarah one day tells them that she wants to join them one night whenever they go dancing. And they were like, there are dances every night. And Sarah was like, every night? Yes, every night. So they went to naming some of the clubs, who was going to be where, when, and all of this. Eventually, Sarah does join them for a night out on the town. And there was this one man there who Lyle had started, I think she started having a crush on him. But he was just crass. He was just, yes, he had money. But, you know, if you're going to make him spend his money on you, you're going to have to be worth it, whatever worth it is. So she would come back and she would tell the girl, they knew who the man was. And they had tried to tell her, I just don't know what you see in this man. Don't let him, lead you into thinking that he's not who he says he is. Because they could see that the man meant no good. But Lyle, she was similar to Gerda in terms of personality. She's just like, look, it is what it is. If I don't want to be bothered, I'm not going to be bothered, and nobody can make me blah, blah, blah. That was the way she interpreted everything. Well, a night or two before she was deleted, she told them that she had gone out with the guy again. And this night, he did something he had never once done before, which was to hit her. He beat her up, and she was sore from it and stuff. But she did eventually tell them. When I said that the friends knew all about the man, they knew everything but what he looked like. He would never, ever, ever show his face in the crowd. So Sarah would go back, and her Gerda's sister Agnes, she was so hurt when her sister ended up deleted. She started neglecting her other children. She neglected the newborn, and then they had 2 other kids. Now, her husband did not have the best attitude anyway. He would come home from work some nights and just bless everybody out, just chew her out. And one time, Sarah showed up unannounced because the day before she had visited them, she saw that the baby was not thriving like she should have been. It was a little girl. She just wasn't gaining or responding like Sarah knew she should have. Well, her husband comes home before Sarah can leave, and he just pretty much chewed Sarah out. And she like, did Agnes send for you? She said, no, she did not send for me. I'm only here because when I was here yesterday, the baby was not thriving. I was just trying to see if she had picked up. So the man told Sarah in no uncertain terms she was never really to show up at their house unless he sent for her. And so the day that he chewed Sarah out, when she got there to check on the baby the day after, knowing that the baby wasn't really doing as well as she should have been, the lady told her that her husband was never going to pay her for those services because he did not request them. And Sarah was like, look, don't worry about paying me. I am here because I want the baby and you to be okay. So she told the housemaids and the nannies, whoever was working for Agnes and her husband, look, the baby is asleep. She herself needs to go to sleep as well. Well, come to find out, long story, short story, her husband was physically abusive to Agnes. And so when Lyle ended up deleted, the girls were warning her to Sarah, and Sarah was like, now what did you say this man's name is? And they said, Will. We know all about Will except for what he looks like, where he lives. We just have never seen him, but he'll drop a line or two, or she'll meet up with him somewhere where it's just her, and we just have never seen her. Well, at the end of the book, we learned that Will is Agnes' husband, the brother-in-law to Gerda. So this lady's husband actually deleted her sister, and then he turns around and deletes one of the sister's women in the friend group that they had, the four of them, Lyle and Gerda, and the other two women. So, that was bad and sad and so very unnecessary. This man was just ruthless, and he just got to the point to where he didn't even try to hide his dislike for, I guess, women, period, because I'm not understanding why you were, being physically abusive to your wife, but yet and still you allowed the sister to move in, unless he thought he could do what he did to his wife. He thought maybe he could do it to his sister-in-law. Maybe that's why he decided to take Gerda out like he did, because or she was just too outspoken for him. Either way, like I said, Lyle was similar in personality to Gerda, and I honestly believe that's why she ended up losing her life. Okay, on to the last book in this series, the Gaslight Mystery series, and this book is entitled Murder on Gramercy Park. Okie dokie. Now this one has a bit of a twist. This time there are 3 deletions, and all of them are males, and the person of interest could be a female. So let's go. So once again, Sarah and Frank find themselves working together to solve yet other murders. Now, this time, they go to Dr. Blackwell's house. He is deceased, and his wife has just given birth to a baby, which is Sarah's excuse for being there to begin with. But he was a doctor. He was a quack doctor, we would call them today. He always was coming up with different potions and formulas to help you get rid of, like if you were on drugs real bad, he always claimed to have the cure the cure for whatever ailed you, so to speak. Matter of fact, his wife, Letitia, is a drug addict. She has a thing for morphine, and she's always somewhere running around doing what she needs to do to get her fix every day. Now, he's quite older than her. Her father wanted them to marry, but Dr. Blackwell used to make his wife, Letitia, he always experimented on her. So whenever he was giving lectures, or if he was, in a lab or something, Letitia was always the person he used to guinea pig everything, and she just didn't want to do it. She never wanted to do it. But something happened where there was some physical pain. It started out, she had a legitimate reason for the morphine. But over time, with all of these different drugs and stuff her husband was making her do and use, she just eventually got hooked on morphine, and she just couldn't shake it. So, quite naturally, she would be the first person that would come to mind. However, excuse me, y'all. Her husband, Dr. Blackwell, had been married once before, and he had a few children from that marriage. Now, I think he was closer in age to his first wife. But Letitia knew that he had once been married. She knew she didn't want to marry him, but she felt she had no choice because he was a powerful man, and so was her husband. She came from money, just like the other victims in these books. Now, this is the one family that Sarah had known of, but she didn't really have close ties to this particular family like she did the other two in the other two books. But because of her level of expertise being a midwife, and a nurse, and having some kind of a relationship with the police chief, Frank Malloy, by the time we get to this book, Frank is actually asking or requesting that Sarah Brandt helps him and see if they together can solve the cases. And so far they have. Now, for some reason, one day, 16, 17-year-old boy shows up to the Blackwell mansion. He says that Dr. Blackwell is his father and that he did not provide for he and his siblings, which is that first lady he married. That's his son from that marriage. And so Letitia was aware of it, but she just felt like she had no choice but to decide with her husband. So she didn't really do anything. When he first got there, the 17-year-old, I think he thought she wasn't aware that he had once had a whole nother family somewhere and had just apparently walked off. Well, she did know it, and there was nothing she could do about it. All right, so eventually he ends up being deceased as well, but before he gets deceased, they thought that he may have been the one to delete his father because he was a very young man for the way his dad had done him. They thought he came there to blackmail the dad, but actually when he got there, the dad was already deceased. And so his son was going around telling any and everybody who would listen how his dad just walked out from his mother and his other siblings' mother. I think he had 3 children from that first marriage and only one with Letitia. And like in the other 2 books, these men were significantly older than the women in these books. And for some unknown reason, I guess money needs money because Letitia came from a wealthy family, and Dr. Blackwell, I think he may have been the one that was a few years older than Letitia's father, Samington. But either way it goes, this goes on and on. So okay. Dr. Blackwell had assistants, and he had bankers. He had all the stuff that people with money have, stocks, CDs, homes, whatever. He supposedly had all of this. And so when the son showed up saying all that, he said they thought that's what it was. They thought it was a quick money grab. But then he ended up being deleted, and so they start looking around to see who else would have motive for wanting him deceased, and they looked at Letitia because although she married that man and he guinea pigged her all the way through the marriage, she was not the type to be able to do anything, because just like the first lady in Murder on Astor Place, she too, Letitia, was one of these damsels in distress. But this story not to take place in the American South, especially back then in the 1800s, 1900s. It sure was a lot of Southern daintiness going on. Oh, I just can't bear. I'll pass out and all of this stuff. So, but when she wasn't acting like she was just gonna pass out, she was always getting her fix. She was hoarding morphine pills from any and everybody she thought would keep it a secret, and for the most part they did. One of the people who was helping her to get these pills, however, is, as we find out in the book, he is Letitia's newborn baby father. They, let me see, what was his name? Dudley, Peter Dudley was this man's name. And he and Letitia had been sneaking around, carrying on an affair pretty much for the entire time that Dr. Blackwell and Letitia was married. Now, if Dr. Blackwell knew of it, he never let on. It wasn't until everything was, being revealed at the end of the book that we find out. Well, there was this one, he was a banker, and he also was some sort of an assistant to Blackwell, and he knew all of Blackwell's dirty little deeds. He knew where the bones were buried, so to speak. So when Doctor was found to be deceased, and once they got past Letitia being the one that could have done it or would have done it, all eyes turned on everyone in Dr. Blackwell's circle. This includes one of his representatives. His name was Amos Potter. Now, Amos was a scrawny little petite little man, but he seemed to know more about Dr. Blackwell than Dr. Blackwell himself did. And so we go on in the story and we find that Amos felt like if he survived Dr. Blackwell, that everything Dr. Blackwell had would go to him. Now, he was the only one who felt that way. They weren't really looking at Letitia because she had money of her own. But, due to her father, I shouldn't say she had money. Her father was also rich, and they knew if worst came to worst, they knew she could go back home to her father, which essentially is what happened, because by the time the rubber met the road, baby, goodness gracious, let's see if I can keep up with all of this. Okay, I told you that Dr. Blackwell's son ended up missing. His name at birth was like Edward Blackwell, the son, and he was a junior. But after the father walked away from the family at some point in time, the son changed his name from Edward Blackwell to Kevin Brown. And at first they thought, well, maybe he did that so when he came to town asking questions, no one would have any reason to think he would be related to the doctor. But then when he ends up being deleted, and I can't remember who, it was another person that worked for Dr. Blackwell, but he was, according to Amos, this other man was at the bottom of the totem pole. He didn't stand to gain as much as Amos felt he would receive. So this goes on. Well, then next thing you know, once we learned that Letitia had been having an affair with Peter Dudley for the pretty much the duration of her marriage to the doctor. One day, Sarah and Frank are talking to Amos, and he is telling them, like, I do everything for Dr. Blackwell. He really doesn't have to lift a finger. I am over his payroll. I am over his, I guess, what do you call it? When you ordering different medicines, I do all of that. He acted as though if at any time Dr. Blackwell needed him to step in to serve for him, he was not only capable of doing it, he could do it gladly, and it would be correct. Well, now that Blackwell and his son is dead and the other person, and they have ruled Peter Dudley out. Now, what happened with that? Somewhere along the way, Amos, after he learns that Peter was in position to serve some sort of role in the doctor's affairs in terms of, I don't think Doctor left Peter any money, so to speak, but he might have left him, just a little something to say thank you. So Amos went and tried to delete Peter. Peter ends up in the hospital. Amos had bound that man up all kinds of ways. And he was right there in the hospital when all of it went down. But he leaves. Well, by the time Frank gets in there to see, because once he finds out Peter has been, someone tried to delete him, he goes to the hospital, and when he wakes up, he is still real sore. He doesn't really know where he is and all of that stuff. But and they still have not said that Peter would live. I'm sorry, they have not said that Peter would live. So he was just kind of fading in and out, and this went on for a few days. But one of those days, somehow, Amos and Frank ended up in that exact hospital room. Amos decided to come and try to finish Peter off. I believe was his reason for being there. But before he could do it, Frank shows up. And so Frank is questioning him and telling him, what all they have on him, and the record books, and the payrolls, and the this, that, and the other. And that's when Amos, I think he didn't mean to, but he got mad. And he said, yeah, he had tried to delete Peter because he knew, he felt like he himself, Amos, should have been the only person to be in line to receive whatever Dr. Blackwell had left. And so he thought that man had been deleted. But Peter just laid there and listened. So they, they eventually arrest Amos. And when Peter was well enough to go home, he and Letitia were going to try to make a go out of their relationship. Now, her father just flat out does not like Peter, period. That was part of the reason he married her off so fast to Dr. Blackwell. Well, now that he knows that his grandson is not Dr. Blackwell's, and his daughter is having to move back home with him until, whatever they can work out. He's still not crazy about Peter, but he's not too quick to just write him off anymore. Now, I haven't touched on the relationship between Frank and Sarah beyond a professional standpoint. But I think if there's any difference in between Murder, She Wrote and these three books anyway, is that, okay, I did not watch every episode of every season of Murder, She Wrote. I did not. But I did watch enough to know that Jessica Fletcher, who was Angela Lansbury's character, the main character, Jessica never pursued an intimate or a personal relationship with any of the men she came in contact with. I know sometimes her nephew would be on there, and it would always be like she would go on vacation to visit a friend from college, and it was always a woman. They never gave Jessica any love interest, and we have not seen anything so far in these three Gaslight Mystery books either. However, Sarah has cooked for Frank a lot, and so he's eaten, and he's kind of a hard-nosed detective. Like Sarah, he also was once married. He lost his wife in childbirth. So he lost his wife during childbirth. The son does not speak. He may grunt or make a noise on occasion. He lives with his mother, and his mother tends to his son. That's why he can go and work all of these long hours and cases and stuff, but he just does not like to be at home because his mother is just a nagger. She's always complaining about something Frank is doing or not doing that she complained about. The son is always something because the son can't talk, and there's something wrong with one of his feet. So the one time Sarah met his son, Johnny, she by being a nurse and delivering babies, she looked at him and she just observed him a lot. And so later on, the next time they met up, they went to lunch somewhere, and she told him, Frank, that she felt like Johnny was deaf, where, Frank was not trying to hear that. Oh, no, that's just not going to work. And she said, look, I know a doctor who deals, most of his patients are deaf. And not only is that his primary population of patients, but he is in connection with the deaf school there in the town. I think they are in New York. Could be wrong, maybe Massachusetts. Anyway, I ain't pay that attention. But so Frank was not trying to hear of it, but he eventually relented and took Johnny to see the doctor, and she was right. He was deaf in both ears. And so she told Frank if he determines that he is deaf, he can put you in touch with the people at the deaf school, and I think they will even allow you to go visit the school, tour the school to see that these kids grow up and they live successful and productive lives. Well, Frank being a policeman, he never really was around any hearing impaired people, period. But he does go to the school, and he meets with the principal, I'll say, at the school, who's a hearing man. But he has a completely deaf secretary. So he motions for the secretary to come out. And he goes back talking to Frank. And then he looks at the secretary. And mind you, like I said, he's completely deaf. And he asked the man, the principal asked the secretary, well, did you get all of that? And the man said yes. And he said, well, can you repeat it back? This blows Frank's mind because he was told that the man was completely deaf. He was like, well, how? You can't be completely deaf because you know exactly what the man said. And that's when he started using sign language. Just so happens that this secretary read lips and used sign language. And so he was telling Frank, this is why the man could keep up, because as long as he can see you, he knows what you're saying. And then if you don't know sign language, or if you don't, he reads your lips. And then, if he's around other deaf people, maybe they don't read lips or they don't read to the capacity that the secretary does. That's okay, because the secretary also knows sign language. So Frank left away highly impressed with what he learned. And then he got in touch, Sarah put him in touch with an orthopedic doctor, and he was supposed to have surgery to correct whatever was wrong with his foot. They said something about having to break it so that so they could reset it and it would grow back. And once he healed, he should not have problems walking again. So I'm thinking that, before I leave this, the mother, Frank's mother, Johnny's grandmother, she was just always, like I said, she was a nagger. And she used to always complain about Johnny couldn't do anything. And she almost sounded as if he was a burden to her. But then when she found out that he could actually be taught, and that the day would eventually come when he didn't have to rely on her as much as he does now, because at this point I think Johnny is 3. Then she's a little disappointed and sad because now she has no one who needs her, or at least not to the extent that Johnny does. So it's going to be interesting to me to see just exactly how far Frank and Sarah's relationship outside of work, how much it evolves, and if it doesn't, why. So that's going to wrap this video up, book connectors. I know it was a bit lengthy, but I had 3 books and I wanted to go ahead and get them out to you, which is what I did. So yay me, subscribers. Thank you so very much for being subscribed. Visitors, thank you just as much for viewing the channel. Feel free to join us. Everyone, please remember, just make sure to check to make sure that you are still subscribed to the channel. Be sure to like, comment respectfully, and share. And then, by all means, please don't forget, once you know that you are still subscribed, don't forget to make sure your notification bells are not only turned on, but I need them to be set to all. Why? So you'll know whenever I upload or whenever YouTube releases a video. And in the meantime, book connectors, remember this. As long as there are books around, there is always something to read. And until we connect again, book connectors, be safe out there. Have a wonderful week. And God bless.